Singapore's small and open economy has always been vulnerable to external shocks and headwinds, and it's had to navigate through some tough times. I sat down with Trade and Industry Minister Chun Sing for a wide-ranging interview for a closer look at the challenges that the economy faces. Minister Chan also spoke about domestic politics and climate change and how sustainability doesn't have to be achieved at the expense of economic growth.
I don't think any country, including Singapore, only look at development from the GDP perspective. The GDP is but one of the many yardsticks that we benchmark ourselves. There are other yardsticks on your human capital development, on your sustainability, and so on and so forth. So that's one. Second, I think when you talk about climate change, many people tend to think of this as something perhaps 50 years later, but for Singapore it is about now. Because before we even talk about climate change, we have a carbon budget constraint. Now in the past, when we choose our industries to develop, we generally look at the constraints of manpower, land, maybe fiscal resources, and so forth. But increasingly, we have to look at the carbon budget. In Singapore, being a small country with a finite carbon budget, we cannot just attract any industries that we want, regardless of how many jobs they might create or how much GDP that it will produce. So for example, to what extent can we continue to have a viable petrochemical sector that is already at the top of its class within the global petrochemical industry, given the Paris Treaty and our promise and our obligations under the Paris Treaty. We will have to continuously evolve our economy such that we become a more carbon-light economy, or rather what they call less carbon-intensive economy. Now that has implications on our industries, that has implications on the jobs that we can create for Singaporeans here and now. There's tremendous opportunities of how we can redesign our production processes, our buildings to be much more energy efficient. And we are quietly optimistic that many of these things can and will come from Singapore. Whichever country that can best help its people and businesses make the adjustment will stand the best chance to thrive in the global competition. And if any country can do this well, then Singapore must be one of these countries. Otherwise, we will lose out compared to many other countries.
One of Singapore's aspirations is to be an innovation hub. But when we look at how well Singapore companies have done, we don't see very many on the global stage. Do you think we can do more to support the ecosystem for innovation here?
The question is, how does our investment pipeline look like? This year, our investment figures are very strong. In fact, it has surpassed our expectations, which means that now the realized investments are creating very good jobs for us. Then if we look at the next 2-3 years, we already can know what will be our realized investment figures because we have the pledges for this year. So even we take away a small little percentage that might not come to fruition, the rest of it, based on our historical norms, we will already know the strong investment pipeline for the next 2-3 years. It is significantly higher than what we had projected for.
The Prime Minister has said that the next election is going to decide whether Singapore can sustain a good and stable government and take care of Singaporeans' livelihoods and well-being. What to you is at stake in terms of the stewardship of Singapore's economy, particularly taking into account the uncertain times that we're in?
The politics and the economics are closely intertwined. On one hand, you need a strong, stable, coherent political system to inspire confidence in the economics, in the investment. We can work it positively, whereby the strength and coherence of our political system enable us to have strong economic investments, creation of good jobs, helping everybody move along amidst all the disruption, and then this will allow us to support a strong political system and the virtuous cycle continue to spiral upwards. This is why it is so critical in the next election for us to send that positive signal, not just to ourselves, but to the rest of the world. So I think that is the crux of the election.